Welcome to episode 235 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, starting my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. This past week, I was incredibly fortunate to have attended and presented at the International Association of School Librarians annual conference. This year, it was held in Rome. Some of you may have noticed that I made no mention of this in recent episodes, and that was intentional. First of all, I carry with me a persistent and nagging apprehension, which no doubt is a direct result of the pandemic. Make plans only to have them upended by unforeseen circumstances. Secondly, I am very aware of the privilege which comes with being able to have such a goal even realized. I have the resources to attend this overseas conference regardless if my district funds me or not, which they do not. And I went to this conference because I sent myself to this conference, and that is a privilege which I do not like to flaunt. I am grateful to the Library of Michigan, which provides a travel stipend for librarians attending conferences, and it paid for my flight to Rome. Another privilege which I could not ignore for 1 minute, and that was the entire conference was held in English. A reminder which I have always expected someone else to accommodate my personal limitations. I was in awe of my fellow attendees who moved between languages with such fluidity and generosity so that everyone could be included in the conversations. Would I recommend attending this conference? Absolutely. It was like school librarians merged with the United Nations for a week. There were attendees from 34 countries who descended on this Lasallian campus. And most of us arrived without our families in tow, so it's similar to summer camp in that we didn't have anywhere else to go or any other demands on our time. So we made friends, and that was pretty much the focus of so much of what we did, whether we were in sessions or between sessions or after sessions. But every opportunity we had to connect, we did. Whether it was a coffee break, every single meal we had, we engaged in conversations with school librarians and administrators and academics and researchers. So this was the first in-person conference, which had been held in several years. So there were many people who were getting reunited with past friends. Our hosts were incredibly gracious, offering tours and keynotes from area universities and the meals. Let me just say, as someone who customarily inhales a daytime meal at school in about 3 bites, unceremoniously, the culture shock of this experience was significant. Imagine entering an on-site restaurant, linen tablecloths, and chilled white wine on every table, and a leisurely 3-course meal, an entire hour dedicated to eating slowly. This included a pasta dish, pork, turkey, or chicken, as well as grilled vegetables, followed by fruit and more wine. And let's assume that drinking on the job is a fireable offense for most school districts. Well, this librarian was going to enjoy and celebrate every single meal because you know what? When in Rome, you don't want to be rude to your hosts. Our afternoon and evening excursions were opportunities to continue our earlier conversations and swap media contacts. We navigated the metro, sampled gelato along the way, enjoyed very late dinners after 9:30 p.m. I did present a session on Thursday. The resources are included in the show notes. And on Friday, I was able to attend a full day tour exploring a local school library, a university library, a bookstore, and a museum, along with a wonderful lunch. We were invited during the week to attend an evening organ performance in the sanctuary by the organist from St. Peter's Basilica. And I thought about giving everybody a shout out, and I will be completely honest, there were days I just was not writing down every single person I met and where they were from. But I'm going to try, but please understand I am invariably leaving people out, and I am really sorry, but let's go. So I met Diane and Kay and Liz from Australia, Antonia in Croatia. I met at least 4 school librarians from Singapore, Joanna in Korea, Marta in China, Helen in Hong Kong, Marie, Nuri, and Reina in Panama. And from Iceland, there was this amazing school librarian. She made an auction item, which I bid on, and she was fantastic. But she is in Iceland, and I just had to have this amazing runner, and I posted it on social media, but I forget her name. There was Corey in Holland, Renata in Lithuania, Annette, Idun, and Stina in Norway. There were several attendees from Sri Lanka, Kay in California, Valerie in Connecticut, Janine in Illinois, Gina and Megan in New York, and Mona in South Carolina. And again, missing lots of people here, and I'm really sorry. So I was doing my best. For a first-time attendee, I think I was doing pretty good. So, friends, I think it was a fantastic experience. Have they decided on the location for next year's conference? No, they have not. But stay tuned. I did include links in the show notes to the organization, the International Association of School Librarians, as well as a picture gallery of the place where we stayed, which was amazing, Casa La Salle. And it was a wonderful opportunity and experience, and something that if anybody can have the opportunity to do that, please put it on your bucket list. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Sarah in California, Martha in Georgia, Catherine in Nevada, Julie and Michael in New Hampshire, Alyssa in New Jersey, Lisa in Ohio. Raph from Australia was very kind to write, "Hi, Amy. Bit of fangirling all the way from Australia. I'm a teacher librarian, and I've been listening to your podcast for the past 6 months. You've given me so many amazing ideas. The breadth and depth of your interviews with teacher librarians and librarians from around the world, shining a light on the work we all aspire to do. Help these adults of the future navigate their world through literature, digital literacy, information literacy, and research. Your support of us teacher librarians is just inspiring, as it can be invisible, a thankless role, and often taken for granted or discarded so easily without truly understanding our value and worth. Thank you for your offer of sending me a sticker. It will take pride of place on my laptop. Wishing you a restful school holiday and a time to rest, relax, and rejuvenate in preparing for the new academic year. Sincere thanks for all you do. Generously, kind regards, Wrath." And friends, I always keep international postage at the ready for opportunities to surprise my mail carrier with a letter going halfway around the world. So I love these kinds of requests, and you know what? I'm happy to make sure that everybody gets a sticker who wants one. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook. On Twitter, my handle is @LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Friends, be sure to listen to episode 224. I announce a new sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs. And now a chance to hear from one of Literati's team members, Lisa. Friends, I am so excited. Lisa Howard, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Amy. I'm glad to be here.
You know, friends, I am so grateful to Literati to have this opportunity to meet with many of their team members, because it really does give me a better appreciation of the kind of collaborative effort that goes into ensuring that school librarians have a really fantastic experience working with Literati. Lisa, would you please let listeners know, what is it that you do for Literati?
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. My role at Literati is I'm the Vice President of Operations. In that role, I plan, direct, coordinate, oversee the operational activities in the Literati fulfillment centers for both book fairs and clubs. What that means is I'm also ensuring the development and implementation of effective operations and cost-effective systems to meet the current and future needs of the organization. In addition, I manage all aspects of the transportation, shipping, and asset procurement to support getting Literati products into the hands of our customers.
I can't imagine. You must be busy all day long.
Yes, I am. And then some.
But again, I appreciate when a book fair arrives at my school, what I sort of fail to understand is all the work that it took to get that content to me in a way that is timely. And all of a sudden we're sort of eyes wide open to realizing just how much work there is behind the scenes. So would you let us know, what do you do to support school librarians? How do you make sure that we have the best book fair experience possible?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking, as book fairs is something that I hold near and dear to my heart, Amy. I have spent most of my career supporting reading and art education in the schools. Reading is my first love, and I believe that every child should have the opportunity to select a book that speaks to them, and that every child should experience the joys of book ownership. While our great data and algorithm ability to watch and learn what the kids are buying, our product team works tirelessly to ensure the best products are available for our operations teams to pick, pack, and ship every fair. As fairs go through the production process, we have great fulfillment center operation team members that work hard every day to ensure that the right books are placed on the right fixture for every fair. I read every customer survey that comes in, and we make necessary adjustments from the feedback to ensure the book fair experience is the best possible for every customer. I also visit fairs each season to spend quality time with our customers, seeing what we're doing right and what we can improve upon.
Wow. Wait, you guys survey all of the librarians who have Literati Book Fairs, right?
We do. And we have a lot of great people that give us great feedback of how we can improve and make things better, and also attaboys for what we do well. We really appreciate our customers' time in doing that.
Well, and I got to say, as somebody who has hosted many book fairs, 14 to be exact, friends, because I do keep track, and forgive me, but school librarians are very detail-oriented. And you know, when we invest this kind of time and take away from other things we could be doing, it means so much to know that the folks at Literati are doing everything they can to ensure that we are having a great experience. Lisa Howard, thank you so much. I hope that you come back on the show. I'd love to learn more about what you do.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me. Have a great day.
Do make sure to tune in and learn all about Literati and their generous offer. Librarians who book their first Literati Book Fair for this upcoming school year and mention the code UNITED will receive a $500 gift card from Titlewave. As always, there's a link in today's show notes. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo Research Database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. I am also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 5. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, National School Library of the Year, and my conversation with Carrie Betts. Carrie Betts, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Especially because it's the summertime and we could be doing just about anything right now.
Yes, we could.
So friends, as you well know, it is not easy to locate librarians and then better yet, sort of lock down a time when we can both meet and talk. So Carrie, thank you for making time out of your busy day to share with us and listeners about this amazing designation which you have received, the National School Library of the Year.
It's my pleasure to be here. I'd rather be in the air conditioning in my house than outside in 90-degree weather. So
absolutely. So, friends, Carrie and I first recorded 3 years ago in June 2020, episode 79, Collection Development. I had attended your presentation at our state conference in fall of 2019, and I really appreciated it because collection development is so foundational. It is one of the required courses that I think everybody takes in our library certificate program and our master's programs. But really after that, it really is learning on the job, and it's not always pretty.
It is not always pretty, and we can get so caught up in the lists that keep coming out that we can refer to and missing that point, the opportunity to work with our community to determine what's best for our communities. So,
well, and I do think because we usually are developing that collection in isolation away from other librarians, and it's so contextual that we have to take so many things into consideration that what works for one library, and for me, it's helpful to listen to another librarian do this and say these things out loud, because I'm full of self-doubt.
You shouldn't be.
You know, Carrie, given the topic of today's conversation, would you give listeners an idea of where in the country you work and what grades you support, and how long have you worked at West Maple Elementary Library?
Sure thing. So I work and live in Michigan, Southeast Michigan. We are a Metro Detroit area school. Our school, West Maple, is located in Birmingham Public Schools, Michigan. And we are it's a K-5 building. And we also have a preschool program that runs in there. That's not officially part of my schedule. We also are unique in that we house the French School of Detroit within our building. And so we serve a lot of French-speaking families in our school because they'll go to the French school in the morning and then they will feed into our regular daily classes at about 10 a.m. I've been working at West Maple I just finished my 7th year in that building. And we work on a flex schedule. So I see on a fixed schedule, it's a fixed flex schedule, sorry. So I see on a fixed schedule, K1, 2, and then on a flex schedule, I'll see grades 3, 4, and 5.
It's like you've got the best of both worlds. Is your rotation like it's a weekly calendar, or are you an ABCD?
It's an ABCD rotation. So every 4 days I will see the classes every 4 days once.
Awesome. You know, friends, I've been to Carrie's library, and this is something that really inspired me to learn the power of learning from others. My district at the time allocated 1 day for us to have instructional rounds. It's an opportunity to shadow another educator who does a similar job. And in 2017, you and West Maple Library already stood out as an exemplary program, a full-time elementary school librarian in one building. And I reached out to you, and you said yes.
I did. It was such an amazing thing to be an elementary school librarian in one building. It was awesome.
Well, and I'll be honest, you have what everybody else wants. And while this may not sound remarkable to some of our listeners, in the context of, many of them are very aware that in Michigan, we don't necessarily have what one would say is an ideal set of circumstances. As somebody who for 7 years worked in 9 different schools over the 7 years, it really is a stopgap measure which is meant to address what is unfortunately a dwindling population in Michigan and therefore a dwindling tax base in Michigan.
Yes. Well, and to be clear, in Michigan right now, 9% of Michigan public schools have a single full-time librarian in a single building. It's only 9%. Most of our schools don't have a school librarian at all.
Exactly. And this is something which, and friends, listeners around the United States and around the world, we all have those hurdles and obstacles. And it maybe for you, it's enrollment. Maybe for you, it's money. Maybe for you, it's space. But we all have challenges. But this is one that Carrie and I have been acutely aware of. And it has created a stressor on us as librarians in this state. So I'm grateful that you have come here to share some of the really success stories that we have in the state of Michigan, because you and I are practically neighbors, and yet there is a very big difference between what your district affords your elementary schools and what most public school districts in Michigan offer, which is if you have a school librarian, they are moving around to the different buildings to support students when they're there.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So yes, you have the ideal, and I'm grateful that you're here today. So, I need to thank you right now because we both realized this, but you shared a resource with me when I was visiting your school. You had told me back in 2017 about the Library of Michigan Travel Grant. It's something I had never heard of before. And friends, all this was something that I think you were sharing in passing. And I have now benefited from this grant twice. And the funny thing is, this is what happens when you get two school librarians together. Like, they just start helping each other. Like, that's just what we do.
100%. I'm so grateful. And I don't hesitate to tell people about our Michigan Travel Grant because it's so helpful in getting us professional development, which might otherwise not be possible.
Absolutely. And, so friends, if you, regardless of where you live, do explore those grant opportunities. And in this case, this is offered through, these are state level funds, which really have been absolutely vital in making sure that we can get to the conferences that we need to and decide would benefit us the most. As the librarian of the National School Library of the Year, I am grateful that you're here talking with us today because I know that there are listeners who are really interested in how'd you do that. But West Maple Elementary Library, this isn't the first time that it has been recognized for its outstanding programming and support. In June 2021, West Maple Library was selected as Michigan's 21st Century Model School Library, the highest accolade bestowed to a school library in the state of Michigan.
That's correct, Amy. We were awarded Michigan's Model School Library in 2021. And with that, we were able to invite our state superintendent to our school building. And I was able to share about some of the way our school library runs, about why it was valuable, why it was essential for our students to have the opportunity to have access to a fully functioning school library, an exemplary school library. And then in addition to that, we were able to invite in Wayne State's Restoring Urban School Libraries program, and Kathy Kumasi came along with them, and we were able to give them a day to visit our school and see what we do. That's really the goal of the Model School Library program, is to act as a model school so that other districts and other people who want to see what an exemplary school library looks like, they can come in, they can visit the school, they can ask me questions and those kinds of things. It also gave me the open doors for opportunities for me to present to administrators in the state of Michigan, specifically about selection policy development and how they needed to have a selection policy within their board policies and those kinds of things. So it's really a beneficial program for the state of Michigan and libraries in the state of Michigan so that school libraries can see and do, and hopefully schools without a school librarian would see the kind of thing that we can provide for students and then understand why it's essential for them to maybe add those programs back into their schools.
I happen to know many districts which have convinced themselves that if you simply have a school librarian in that space for the time that the students are there, and then moving that librarian to another school because there might be students in that library, that is somehow adequate. Or you bring in somebody with no training, and this might be somebody who is a media tech or a library tech, a para, if you will, and they're going through the motions of checking books in and out. But look, they call them librarians all the time. And you're like, well, wait, according to the state of Michigan, that's not a librarian.
Right. It is a challenging situation that we find ourselves in because we value our paraeducators. We value our media techs who are working with students. They're building relationships with students as they're checking in and out materials, but they do not have the same education that a certified school librarian has when it comes to teacher training, and also when it comes to collection development, as we've already mentioned, and when it comes to that unique piece, and we'll get to this probably a little bit later too, but that unique piece where a school librarian should be equipped to understand curriculum that's happening across all of the grade levels so that we can be most beneficial to our students and our teachers in the community that we're serving, so that we can connect them with the resources they need at the time that they need them.
Well, and I think that opening your door it sounds like you had like an open door policy to really anybody who wanted to come and see this model school, because all of a sudden administrators and the people who hold the purse strings of a district would be able to see the potential of what happens when you have a full-time certified school library media specialist in place and not bouncing around to different schools and not having to, say, cover an entire district, but rather be in a dedicated space. But you get to see the potential that all this brings. And now to put a national spotlight on you, that's, amazing.
Thank you.
And friends, the wonderful thing is that Carrie has included some support resources in our show notes. So this is one of those episodes where you're definitely going to want to go and visit our show notes because of all the support materials and the things which Carrie has generously shared with us about her journey, both at the state level and at the national level. So I invite you to make sure you take a look at that. So the timing of this conversation could not be better. It was very intentional. We are recording at the end of July. The application window opens in September for the National School Library of the Year. Listeners will have all of August to do some reflection and consider if this is something they might want to pursue. So I'm very grateful that you're here, because I'm sure that this might be on somebody's radar, and now we have a chance to learn from your expertise.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, so I love that you've given them the opportunity to kind of like focus in on this and think about it. I started thinking about the application process the year before because Lisa Brakel, one of Michigan's own, contacted me and she said, you should probably look at this and apply for this. And I looked at it in November of that year, which only gave me a month to apply. And I was like, no way, but maybe next year. And so I spent, that 6 months thinking about it, actually 9 months thinking about it. I looked at I downloaded the application materials in September. I thought about them for another 3 months. And then it was November again. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have to get this application done. So yes, preparing your listeners for a long thought process is a really good idea.
I appreciate that, because you've gone through all the different steps and and just a quick mention of Lisa Brakel. Lisa Brakel joined us in the spring for a fantastic episode called Retired Librarians Rock. I have to tell you, I just shared that episode with one of my friends who retired, because I said, oh, you're retired? Now you can go work in libraries as a MAME Forever volunteer. And she's like, what's that? I said, well, funny you should ask. I have an episode. So I know that there are listeners for whom this is on their bucket list, and they would like to know. The application process is considerable. There is, as always, a link in the show notes. Would you give us an idea of how much time, start to finish, did you spend compiling all the evidence that would satisfy the requirements of this application?
So I can't give you an hourly time, because what I've learned in this process is that we spend an immense amount of time thinking through or strategizing how we might accomplish one of these tasks, right? So I can't account for all the time I spent thinking. All I know is that it consumed a lot of my brain space. And what I can tell you is when I got down to business, Some things that I would get on right at the start is making sure some things you need are the letters of recommendation. That's like the first and most easy thing that you can kind of accomplish in this. And so that's where I would start, is making sure, especially that you're reaching out, because you're going to need ideally a recommendation from your superintendent and from your principal. And those two people are vastly busy. So I would, in September, I would say, hey, I'm hoping to apply for this, and then put that out there and ask them for your recommendation letter. And then you also need recommendation letters from community members and from teachers. So there's a whole lot of recommendation letters that you need to kind of get the word out about when you are going through this. So that's an easy kind of like, that's the low-hanging fruit, right? Like those are some easy progress points that you can make. I asked. And you can check that off. And then, of course, you have the flip side of that, where then you have to follow up with them and say, hey, remember I asked you 3 months ago for this letter? Again, is because everybody is so busy. And then the next thing, though, is really compiling like all of your items. I'm trying to think, if we're thinking about it, probably you could get this fully done if you worked a full workday for 7 days straight. Then you could get this application process done. I will tell you that this is the most challenging application I've ever filled out, including for any job that I've ever done. Not to scare people.
But I think that that's important to be said, because so many times we're like, I'm just going to try this. I'm just going to try this. I mean, this is sort of like the PhD of awards that you can be applying for. This is commitment. This is going to require all your bandwidth. And I think that it's really valid. It sounds like you would not recommend this to somebody who is perhaps also dedicating a great deal of their energy to, that doctorate.
Right.
Or perhaps they're actively trying to complete graduate classes. It might be a lot.
Certainly. It would be a lot. When I think about like the level, when I'm a mentor for some of our Wayne State students who are in the library program, right? And so they just contacted me. I just talked them through our school library 21st century document that helps a library, evaluate itself and determine, if they're a qualified library, if they're an exemplary library, and if they're not one of those two things, like how can they get there? Right? And that is a cumbersome process, right? And this is that and then some. So, it takes a lot.
Take our state award and put it on steroids, and there we go.
Some of the things that you have to go, and like you said in here, like in the notes, we're going to have those 10 criteria items. But what I would like to kind of hone in on, like you are going to end up doing a lot more writing than you thought you were. Everything has to be submitted with one link. And so then you have to determine what is the platform you're going to use to submit this application. And so I think those two things were perhaps the most cumbersome part in determining, first going through, I went through what is listed on the website, right? Like, and I wrote out my answers to every single question, and that took a lot of time. And then, luckily, again, I'm just going to call Lisa Brakel out here and her sister, who both reviewed all of my writing and, gave me the feedback for, okay, change this sentence, you forgot a comma, all of those kinds of things that you need. You need peer editing in this process. And likely you're going to want to give time for that. Those pieces, like that's the next, it's low-hanging fruit, but it is time-consuming. So start answering those questions that are on that list.
So I love that you mentioned the importance of having a fellow school librarian who is intimately aware of this process and can give you that kind of feedback, because while this is your undertaking, having another set of eyes, this can't be an educator, this can't be a spouse, this has to be somebody who's in the trenches with us day in, day out, and they know of which you speak, and just how important this is.
Absolutely. Super incredible to have people that you can go to look over things and to give you feedback on those kinds, all of these certain criteria. And so you have to give a community profile, right? Like you have to talk about the community that you're serving. And some of the things were really easy to fill out. Like they give you this chart that you can fill out with your demographics and your collection report and those kinds of things. But then you need to also answer the keystone questions. You have to answer, how does your curriculum connect to the National School Library Standards? And how do you actually teach that? Like, so it's one thing to have a curriculum that says, hey, these are the things that we're going to teach. But it's another thing to give an example of how you do that. And give a lesson to them, a lesson piece to show them that.
Before we dive into this evidence, I think it is worth mentioning that even if listeners aren't interested in applying for the National School Library of the Year, many of these criteria would make excellent goals for a librarian to work on for their annual goal or for their personal evaluation.
Absolutely. This is like super, like you could pick any one of these questions and put that right in your evaluation form for sure. Easily.
Love it. So I'm curious because you mentioned that everything has to get turned in using a single link. And so now I'm just hung up. I envision a website or a Google Drive folder. What was your solution? How did you solve this problem?
So I'm so glad you asked. I actually ended up using a Google site, and I put everything on my Google site, and I shared that Google site with the committee. And for you listeners, in the notes, I will also share what that looks like minus all of my answers to the direct questions. So that you can kind of see, because here was the thing. I could have just sent a Google file with a list of other links to all of the information, which would have been a list of links and a bunch of writing. And if you can imagine just reading a bunch of writing, that doesn't really give you a picture of what your library is doing. And I didn't want to just give them a list. And then also you can look at some previous winners and kind of how they showcase some things. I think they list at least the previous years. So I guess in this case, it'll be mine. But I was able to go back and look at the previous winners to see kind of like, oh, well, what did they do to, display their work kind of thing. Now, the interesting thing is that I would not have known to use Google Sites, or I might not have even gone that route, had my fifth grade teacher not come to me. A fifth grade teacher, the fifth grade team actually at our school, had come to me, and they were doing this project with the fifth graders, and they're like, hey, can our kids make websites that can be shared out? And I was like, I don't know. Let me see. And so this was like kind of a double benefit for me, because I was able to create my portfolio, practice how to use Google Sites so that I could teach students how to build a Google site and teach teachers how to use that in their classroom. So it was a win-win situation for sure.
Well, and as is with every time we have to learn something new, our efforts are never wasted, because whether we're doing something to solve our own problems, invariably that foundation of skills is going to come into play at some point or another when we're supporting our school community. I am drawing a lot of connections between this conversation and ones which I've had with Florida school librarians, because the Florida Power Library Schools program is one which has also, like others in other states, is one which encourages school librarians to invest this kind of reflective experience, sort of to better the programs that they're offering to their students and to their school communities writ large.
Absolutely. And I love that you use the word reflective, because if there's anything that anybody gets out of filling out this application, of going through these things and thinking about what really am I doing? I was so worried when I looked at Inquire, right? Like, as one of our shared foundations, and I was like, what do I let the kids inquire about? Like, right? Like, how do I do this? And I had to really think about that and really had to analyze, what is it I'm teaching and what are the opportunities that I'm giving our students and our faculty? Like, how am I hitting these criteria? And so reflection, and my principal and I talked about this too, as we were applying for this award and we had already done everything and it was out of our hands. And we were like, if nothing else, we did this and we were able to reflect on the things that we're doing well, and we were able to see where we could improve.
The word that comes to my mind is accountability, because it is in some ways a checklist of some gold standards, some best practice. And if you, like me, sometimes we lose sight of those goals when we get mired in this every day. We are doing the things we need to do every day to support our students. And I get a sense that this is an invitation for school librarians working collaboratively with their administrators, because you cannot do this without their support, to recognize that there are some goals. They may be lofty goals, but in this case, they are aspirational, and it's a way for us to look at our bigger impact and make substantial improvements to what we do.
Absolutely. And you have completely captured what I've shared with our school board when they were like, hey, we got this great award. I reminded them, like, this doesn't just happen. This is not just a me show, right? Like, this is not just like the Carrie Betts, ooh, she's a great librarian. This is not what it's about. It is about a school district that gives us a budget. It is about a school district that invites us to the table when they are redesigning our selection policies. It is about principals who value our input and the resources that we provide and invite us to sit on the school improvement planning team. It's about all of those things. It's about parents who spend time in the library with me, seeing what we do. And, all the time, like my parent volunteers, they come to me after I've taught a lesson and they're like, whoa, I didn't know that you guys teach these kinds of things. Like, that's amazing. Like when I'm teaching digital citizenship and how kids can be safe when they're on the internet, and they see the responses of kids when I'm talking about balancing their time on devices, right? And if they've ever seen somebody in their family not balance their time well, and, all of the hands go up, right? Like, the kids offer us so much information. And then my kids have an opportunity to create in the library, and they do different things. They have an opportunity for choice that's not always available in a traditional classroom, not because our teachers don't want to give our students choice. They would love to be doing more of that. I think every single teacher would love to be giving their students more choice, but there are academic goals and a little bit of bureaucracy. Like, we have to accomplish these specific tasks in these specific ways that kind of keep us in that. And so I often say that the library is the only place where kids really get to make a choice about what they're learning and about their educational experience.
That's amazing. This is why we press record. You see, if we didn't press record, then it would just be the two of us enjoying this conversation. In our May edition of the Michigan Association of School Librarians newsletter, you shared with us 10 requirements for this application. We're going to sort of look through some of those. And friends, of course, there are links in the show notes. And we're going to talk a little bit, and you've mentioned some of them already, about how you were able to reflect and tackle each of these different criteria. This is very comprehensive. This is a very exhaustive list of things which, I again, if you weren't going for this award, you could certainly sort of cherry pick and figure out which goal you wanted to sort of do for this particular year. First and foremost, that this library has a curriculum. And you've said that. I mean, you have a curriculum. That is something which not everybody has.
Right. And this is another thing where it comes down to not being about one person, right? Like my team of librarians in Birmingham, we sat down, we worked collaboratively. We had a team from at least one librarian, two librarians actually, from each of the grade levels. And we were like, okay, here is what the standards say. And now how do we break that down into curriculum that is similar to the curriculum format that our district is using, right? And so we had to go through step by step as a team and determine what is the curriculum we're teaching and how does it address these national standards, right? So that was already in place. Otherwise, I would have had to come up with that from scratch and figure that out. That would have already been a question that I answered no to. No, we don't have a curriculum. But we were lucky enough that we had already done that work, and so it was available.
So, Carrie, I'm really curious because this is a board-approved curriculum, correct? You say, you're like, oh, of course. You're like, no, you have to understand, not all schools have board-approved library curriculum because not all schools have certified school librarians working and who would get together and generate something, who would then have to go through and get that board approved. So this is a very large step for some districts, depending on where they are. And so I don't take anything for granted, but it's a great advocacy piece when you've got school librarians going to the Board of Education and saying, here is our curriculum. We would like this to be approved so that we have this recognition coming from the Board of Education.
Absolutely. And if you are being required as a school librarian or working in a school library as a teacher, if you're being required to teach students school library things, you need to have a curriculum. You are a teacher and you should have a curriculum, just like a math teacher has a curriculum and a science teacher has a curriculum, or first grade is teaching a curriculum with all of those subject areas. And consider this, if you are in a school that doesn't have a school librarian, who is teaching the digital citizenship that I'm teaching, right? Does that fall on the teachers? It should, sadly. And can a teacher add more into their day that is already packed full of the curriculum that they teach? Likely not.
Yeah.
But in any case, yes. So you have to have a school curriculum. You have to have a school library curriculum, and it has to be connected to the national standards. That was an easy one for me because we had it all in Google Drive, and I could just copy the link and make it accessible for the team.
You mentioned inquire, include, collaborate, curate, explore, and engage as the bedrock of library lessons and programming. Did you have to attach examples for each?
I did.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It was. Right? See this on the portfolio that I'll share with you, but I have listed out those 6 things, and I have writing that articulates each of those things. And so I have the written portion, that's part of the application. I wrote it all out for the application, so the applications have that on there. But under curriculum, I believe that I gave examples of here's where it is in our curriculum. And then I gave an example. I actually recorded one of my inquiry lessons and posted that. I recorded students responding to a different inquiry lesson, a coding lesson that we had done. And so all of that to say is, yes, you had to address all of these things. So in the portfolio, you'll see, just to clarify a little bit, you're going to be able to see a thing on curriculum, and it's kind of more the engaging version of the answers to the question. I have on there specific answers so that if the committee was like, okay, yeah, it's nice that she's got all these bells and whistles, but really let's get to the meat of this. What did you do? Then I had all of those written responses available to them as well.
The next criteria, the library demonstrates full integration into the school community by connecting with classrooms, students, staff, and parents in meaningful ways. And some of that would have to be possible because you are getting written endorsements. You're getting these letters of recommendation from your community members. So if this didn't exist, you'd be hard pressed to find people who'd be excited to talk about what you are or perhaps aren't doing. But, you've talked a little bit about this, but is there something that you would like to share that you think really exemplified this in a way that the library is fully integrated?
Absolutely. So part of this comes out if you are so lucky as to become a finalist, this comes out in the interview process, because not only do you do all of this paperwork and gathering, but if you are selected to be a finalist, then you do a virtual interview. And the virtual interview is not just with you. It's also with your principal, your superintendent. It is with a handful of teachers. It is with students. It is with parents. So if you have just written some fluff stuff, it's going to come down to the wire when it comes to interview time, right? So they're looking for that. And so when I think about this question, one of the things I was able to demonstrate actually during the school visit and leading up to that, and again, I've already mentioned my 5th grade team had come to me with this project, right? And we're talking about Google Sites, and they're like, hey, can you teach the kids how to do this? So by the time we've gone through this whole process, I was practicing Google Sites while I was doing this application. And then in February, when they're coming to visit, or April, I don't even remember when they visited, but when they came to visit, one of the lessons that I was delivering was this lesson on how students are going to create this website highlighting the features of this project that they worked on with their classroom teachers, which was this full deep learning curriculum project on, they were building a house. And so they were learning perimeter and area and demonstrating their knowledge of that through the building materials that they chose and how they measured everything. They built a model house. And then for their social studies curriculum, they're connecting it to what are people looking for? What kind of community is this house in? And that kind of thing, right? Like, so they did all of this work, and my job was to help them create a Zillow-like site so that parents could then bid on these houses. Right? And so I am collaborating with the teachers, and I'm saying, okay, so what do you want each of them to show on their page? And the first thing I got was like, okay, here, make it look like, Zillow. And I was like, okay, I'll do some little stuff here. And so I had to create a fake site, right? Like, so I had to do some fake work. If this was my house, if these were the pictures I was going to show, this is how the slideshow part works. This is the details that you're going to include. And then I went through and I created a video of how to do this. I had the step-by-step instructions. And then on the day of my visit, I actually taught this lesson to the students and reminded them that when they forgot everything that I said, that they could go to Schoology and see everything I said all over again. But this took a lot of collaboration with the teachers. And again, this is an example of being fully integrated, because that teacher said, you know what, I bet that she'll have an idea of how we can do this. Right? Like, and so he wouldn't know that if he didn't already work with me on some stuff. Those teachers wouldn't trust that process if they hadn't already worked with me on some stuff. So that's one example of being fully integrated into the school community. There's so many other ways.
Well, and I was going to say, listeners would just tell us more. But you mentioned something that hadn't occurred to me. There's a site visit?
There is a site visit.
Not just a Zoom?
Correct.
Oh, man. And is this an all-day affair? It's an all-day affair. And a committee, how many people are sent to come see you?
So just the 2 committee chairs come to see.
And when you say finalist, you knew you were a finalist at this point?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say finalist, like finalist of 3 or 7 or?
So this year I was a finalist of 2. 2 of us had made it to the finalist stage.
This is so stressful. I'm going to say this next one, and I'm trying not to do it with tone. The library has a budget, and demonstrates a responsible use of that budget.
Right. So this is not a norm that many libraries have. Again, this comes down to a district deciding that there is value in a school library program that functions as a school library program should function. Now, here is what I will say. I don't know if you end up with a regular, when we say budget, right? Maybe your budget is minuscule. Maybe you get $200 a year from your school budget. Maybe. That would still count as a budget, right? Fundraising budget, you could say that my budget comes from fundraising, and then you would have to document, how much are you able to generate yearly. And I would say that if I were evaluating an application, right? Like if we're evaluating an application, we see that one school, the district actually gives them a solid budget that is reasonable versus a district that does not provide a reasonable budget. That's going to give them a different, that's going to allow that library to have a different impact. And so that's going to be part of the evaluation process versus a library that only fundraises and their fundraising doesn't match like what a regular budget can give.
Well, and I ask that because I happen to know that when you apply for the Michigan 21st Century program, just at a state level basis, having a budget is one of the questions. And I have seen on several rather sort of agitated conversations on library Facebook, if you have to fundraise to have money to spend, do you technically have a budget?
You can articulate that, but it's not a regular budget, right?
Because you don't know what you have until the fundraiser is over. How can you budget if you don't start the year knowing what you've got?
It's not necessarily sustainable either, right? So many factors are going to affect whether or not you have that fundraised dollars, right?
All right. This next one's really easy, and yet it's not, because it says the library has a certified librarian at the helm. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, in the district when I covered 9 schools in 7 years, 4 at a time, I could apply for this 21st Century Michigan library program, but I would never be able to reach anything more than just effective, because the only thing that you could, and as long as I was working in multiple buildings, we would only ever be regarded as effective. That the only schools that were eligible for now I'm stuck.
Exemplary status.
Thank you very much. And the reason why I don't know what that status is I was never eligible for it, is because I traveled from building to building. Therefore, we were never eligible for exemplary. And can I just tell you right now, because I no longer work for that district, I took the 21st Century application to my administrator when I was working in 4 buildings. And I had been instructed to do this by my department chair who worked at the high school, said, hey, everybody, we're going to do this because our district is not going to get exemplary status as long as you all are working in 4 different buildings a year. I took it to my principal to sign. And my principal, before signing it, said, I know what you're doing here. I know what you're trying to do, and it's not going to work. And it was a real gut punch. And the pandemic came along, and the world sort of was turned sideways. And I'll tell you what, I've never been able to apply for that, because as long as I worked in that district, we were never going to get anything more than just an effective rating. And it was very defeating. But it also highlighted to our administrators the problems with having a part-time school librarian in every building. So I think this next one's really an easy one, though. And maybe I'm wrong, but this next one, the library offers a robust, diverse collection of resources to the community. Can you tell me what kind of documentation did you have to provide for something like that? Because I have no doubt that you would satisfy that criteria. And for many of us, we would look at this application and say, I'm really doing this well. How did you establish that on the application?
You have to submit one of your TitleWise analysis or whatever program you're going to use. It doesn't have to be TitleWise, but it needs to be a collection analysis that you have to submit.
All right. Awesome. The next criteria, I'm guessing I know how you answered this one. The library adapts to the needs of the community it serves. Did you do something to support your families in the French program?
Yes, we have a world language library within our collection. And we demonstrated this also. I work closely with our ESL teachers because of that world language library that we kind of built up. That was another project when we talk about working within the community, like being deeply involved, right? Like we knew we had English language learners in our community and we wanted books that would support them, books that were the same as their peers were reading, but at least translated into their language so they could have a connection. They could have some sort of connection with their peers.
Awesome. This next criteria, I'm very excited to hear about. The library space is designed with universal access. So how did you satisfy that criteria?
Oh, I made sure that my shelves were the right distance apart. I have flexible seating. Our school is designed with universal access, right? We have to because it's the law and it's the right thing to do, which is why it is the law.
Well, and friends, I'll tell you what, I'm going to include a link in the show notes, episode 152, UDL, Accessibility and Advocacy for Students, because this was, for me, an opportunity to take a deep dive into something for which I will admittedly say I only sort of scratched the surface. I understand in concept, but I wanted to hear how libraries were satisfying many of these best practices to provide universal access for all our students. So I'll include that link in the show notes. This next criteria, the library space has furniture features that make an environment welcoming, inclusive, and engaging to the community it serves. Is this a bunch of pictures that you've included on your website?
Yes. Yes, it was really easy.
Yeah.
And then again, when they come to visit, they see firsthand how it's used and how.
Well, and I'd like to think that for so many of us, we document the things that we do on the daily basis to make our spaces everyone's space. And so even if you're not applying for this application process, but you could start just making it a habit of documenting the things that we do and then sharing those out with our social media and with our communications directors, depending on how your district does it. It's a great way to make sure that people are raising the profile of what we do and making sure that we support everyone in our community. And lastly, the library provides evidence that it is fully supported by the students, the staff, administrators, families, and community members. I sense a lot of this has to do with the letters of recommendation that you're getting. But when it comes to students, did you have to provide any evidence from the students?
You know what I did? I took my notes that students and parents and families sent me for the holidays and things like that. And I displayed those and said, here, it speaks for itself. I could have, in addition to that, I picked the easiest format, but I could have taken pictures of all of my door where I hang all of these things that students bring me because they're so excited about being in the library and how the library is their favorite place in the world and all of these things. There were so many ways that you could demonstrate this because your students do. Your students are responding. I even also, in the past, so for the model school library application, you also had to demonstrate this. And I'll tell you a little secret. I applied for that twice on 2 different years because I didn't get it one year. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just keep trying. So keep that in mind, too. When you're thinking about these applications, like we said, it's a reflective of practice. What can we do better? And in that second application, what I started doing is saving emails that I would get from parents who I've helped from our leadership that was like, hey, thanks for sharing this kind of information with us. And using that to demonstrate our value, because really those are those things that helps us tell our story.
Can I also share teacher emails, and teacher thank you notes. Because I not only saved those, I scanned them and I uploaded them as documentation into my annual evaluation, because it is providing my administrator with insight that they would otherwise not have.
Absolutely.
You mentioned in your newsletter article, friends, there's a link in the show notes, that this is an award for the school library, not the librarian. And yet, the librarian is responsible for this entire undertaking by directing, orchestrating, coordinating, coalescing all the elements, which are then considered by the award committee. I cannot help but think that your administration and school community are pretty impressed.
They absolutely are. And really, this response really comes at the heart of, me not really understanding how to fully celebrate success, and me not fully understanding, how do you respond? Yes, it's so great that we got this award. It's a major award. It's a big deal. But what is the right response? Right? And it helped me. The reason my response is what it is, because I reflected on all of those things that I put in there, understanding that, yes, I organized all of this stuff. And yes, it does need me to, because I'm kind of a go get them, go out there and get it kind of person. So it did need me to do that, but I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself. And so just really emphasizing that, and also understanding that the interview committee for this award is not looking at the personality of the person running this space necessarily, right? You're not getting that accolade. Yes, you run this space and you run it effectively, but it's not because of your particular personality or your particular genius at some particular skill. Right? It is really about how are you working with others in your community. So really, I would say, if you are not working well with the people in your community, this would be a very difficult award for your school library to achieve, because that's really the heart of the award, is how is this serving your students and the school community in the best way possible.
When a school receives a national recognition because of the actions taken by their school librarian, it's remarkable. Listeners should also take a look at the link to Michigan Association of School Librarians' Effective School Libraries resource, because no school library would ever be able to get this kind of recognition in any state without the benefit of a full-time certified school librarian in place in their buildings.
And the American Association of School Librarians also has these kinds of tools available to us so that we can really be advocating for not for our position, but really it's about advocating for the students that we serve, right? Because we know that those students that we serve, if we're in a library, it's so frustrating to me. I know I'm changing gears here, but it is so frustrating to me to think that a few miles down the road, there are students that can't check out a book about frogs from their school library when in second grade they've just covered the life cycle of a frog, right? That teacher has already gotten the hook in. That student is curious and they're like, do all frogs do the same thing? Well, if you have a school library with one book from 1982, that's not going to be sufficient, right? My school library, we had at least 10 books on frogs of all different kinds, right? That's what we want. We want that student to be able to come back the next week and get another book about frogs and another one if they want it, because they're obsessed with frogs at that point. And yes, parents, I understand that maybe you don't want only frog books coming home, but that's part of the learning cycle, right? We're part of that learning process. And it's such a disadvantage to students when they don't get the same opportunity to engage their minds in the way that other students the same age, just a few miles up the road, get to engage their minds. It's abhorrent.
Everybody is nodding their head right now. Absolutely. So, let's get tacky for a minute. is there a prize associated with this award?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes, there is a prize. So this award is put out by the American Association of School Librarians, and it is sponsored by Follett, who gives a monetary award to the recipient of the award. And so that monetary award is $10,000 to use for my school library program, right? For West Maple's school library program, we can use it in any way that we see fit to build the school library program and continue making it a program that deserves a national award.
And your school was still in session when your school was awarded this. I have to imagine this was a fairly big deal when that was announced for your students, for your administrator, for your board. I mean, everybody's celebrating the library.
Absolutely. And it's very fun. You know, our superintendent's reaction when my principal called her on the phone, and I got to sit there on speakerphone and listen to her reaction. It was amazing. And yes, everybody is just like thrilled that we've done something well, right? And we're getting recognized for doing something well. And now we get to continue to build into that program. And that's just a really great thing for us to be able to do.
And I'm going to ask this question because I'm sure somebody wants to know, how are you going about soliciting what your students and the other stakeholders have in mind for the award money, which you are going to get to spend on behalf of your library, your award-winning library?
Well, that is a great question. It's kind of just like sitting there right now as an entity. I have some collection goals that really I feel like need to be met for our students, right? Actually, I would love to use some of it. Kelly Hanks presented probably, I don't know how many years ago, probably 2 years ago, maybe I went to a presentation of hers, and she talks about this after school program that she has to run, but she decided she gets to choose what it is. And she brings the students together and she gives them a budget to spend. She gives them like part of her budget, and that student group gets to decide what is most valuable. She gives them a bunch of print catalogs. They mark the pages. They decide, they evaluate. They realize that they have $10,000 in their cart, but they only have $1,000 in their budget, which always happens to me. And then they're doing some critical thinking about budgeting skills and all of these kinds of things. So that is something that I'd really like to do.
That sounds like so much fun. Oh my gosh. You know, Carrie Betts, you are wonderful. I really, truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy summer to enlighten us. You've given us, some of us are already starting to get those wheels in motion to looking ahead, with August on the horizon. I am so grateful that you've joined us today. Thank you so much for these resources because, anytime one of us shines, being able to sort of make that path clear for anybody else who would like to try this. I really think you've given us a lot of information to go on. Would you let us know how we can see some of this in action on social media?
Absolutely. I still have a Twitter account. I don't have a Threads account yet, so it's very confusing for me in the social media world, but you can follow us at West Maple Media on Twitter.
Have a fantastic rest of the summer, and I look forward to our paths crossing again.
I can't wait.
As with all the episodes that are being recorded and shared out over the summer months, I am so grateful to Carrie and all my guests whose generosity of their time and talents have made all of these episodes possible. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider sending some fan mail to Carrie and adding her to your virtual PLN. One last friendly reminder, friends, use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more and schedule your very first Literati Book Fair and receive a $500 Titlewave gift card. As always, there are links in the show notes. The topic of our next episode will be VR and building empathy, and my conversation with Andrea Trudeau. I hope you will tune in.